Greenhouse people. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and in an effort to provide this critical information in any way you choose to consume educational content, we're pleased to offer this discussion in video and podcast formats. My guest today is Brock Martindale, the National Nursery and Greenhouse Strategic Account Manager at Corteva. Brock grew up in a family greenhouse. He studied greenhouse production at The Ohio State University, and he and his wife, Jen, currently operate a greenhouse in Indiana supplying fresh flowers locally, which is really cool to have someone with this kind of wide range of experience with us today. Our plan this episode is to talk common spring insect pests, including aphids, thrips, and more, and ways you and your greenhouse production team can put together effective plans to control them or knock down their populations. Because, as you know, spring can be unpredictable when it comes to what shows up uninvited. Brock is as much an account manager and grower as he is a well-respected coach. I think that's a very appropriate term. So I know this will be a great discussion. If you like this installment, be sure to subscribe to the Tech On Demand podcast on your favorite podcast app and find dozens of Tech On Demand videos on our YouTube channel. But why don't we go ahead and get started with why don't you talk a little bit, Brock, about how things are shaping up this spring? Because I'm sure it's a busy time with crops and production across North America.
Yeah, absolutely. I think spring is definitely off and running. I don't think that anybody had as many challenges as we all did last week with all the cold temperatures across the U.S. and getting
For
shipping
sure.
taken care of. But that kind of kicked off a slew of calls. Is this cold
Mm,
damage or is this like some disease issues? And in
sure.
some cases, it's going to be a little bit of both.
That's true. That's true. Our technical team heard the exact same thing. It was a busy week for sure.
Yeah,
We saw some
absolutely.
pests popping up too, which I don't know,
Yep.
gets folks like you excited, I think, but probably drives growers a little bit crazy.
Yeah, it does. And I think one of the things that we're trying to figure out is what's going to be that pest this year.
Hmm.
Last year we saw aphid pressure like we've never saw before. It's not that
Okay.
aphids are difficult to take care of.
Hmm.
It's just simply the fact that they were relentless last year. They showed up early and then they didn't just disappear. So,
That's true. That's true. And we
yeah,
saw a lot of mites too, so I'm
yeah,
sure that's going to be on everyone's mind and thrips
yep. Oh
this
yeah.
year. But I'm sure that you and the entire team at Corteva are on top of things and helping growers move in the right direction in terms of strategy or, best approaches using different modes of action and rotations and just general approaches and best practices to keep those crops free of pests throughout the season. So why don't you go ahead and take over and run
Okay.
the show, and I'll jump in with questions or follow-ups. I'll try not to
Yeah.
interrupt you, but I might have questions as you go. But I'm interested in the information that you have to share with us today.
Well, today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. And so, spring season, I think about a lot of sprays that get made across the ornamental business, and a lot of those are kind of like broad spectrum because you're never really just dealing with just that one insect challenge at a time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Expire, but then we're also going to dig towards the end of the session. We're going to talk a little bit about resistance management and why certain products should be considered and kind of go through some reminders for your team as you're kind of ramping up production this spring season. So I'm going to go ahead and dig right on in. Bill, you already covered a really good background about me, and so I think that pretty much covers it. I think people have seen this slide before, but I always laugh the fact that somehow I got started in this business when we still had wooden trays. And
Love
there's a picture of me there with mom in the greenhouse and those old wooden trays that we
it.
had. But I'll jump ahead and dig us into some Expire talk. So, you know, um, what's exciting about Expire is really it takes the one of the trends that we see going on out there is that's kind of like being mixtures, using the two different kinds of active ingredients. And that's what really I think sets Expire apart from some of the other products. It was one of the first insecticides out there to actually mix two actives in a kind of in a formulation together. And so, why did we, end up bringing Expire to the market? And really, this was grower market research that really drove us to this. Plant safety is extremely important. Need to make sure that we don't have doesn't have a phytotoxicity or burn plants. That's obviously really important with something when we talk about plant safety. Um, Growers often talked about they don't get to have the control that they used to from products, and some of that really stems to some of the resistance issues that we're going to talk about in a little bit here. And then they're looking for fewer applications. We all know that we're really busy during the season, and so anytime we can control pest for a longer period of time, that is really key. Reentry interval is a big deal. I mean, during COVID, it was amazing, how busy our facilities all were across the US and just how important that reentry
Mm.
interval really was. And so that's always a big concern when we bring new products to market, want to have low reentry intervals. We've been using the same family of chemistry for a long time, and if you look back, I mean, it takes a lot to bring a new product to market. I mean, we're at 10 to 12 years now to bring a new product to market, and that's just a really long time. So we have to be sure that we do have, whether it's us or even our competitors, have some things in the pipeline to help bring new products along. There's obviously been some things that have exited the market, or some ask of our end user consumers about different types of chemistry that they would like us not to use, and so we've lost some of the tools that were really effective. And really, just overall, just need better insecticides in the industry. And so want to have another option is just to be a broad range of insects. And I always think about growers or IPM specialists kind of as the mixologist, where they're
Yeah.
always putting together, this tank full. So they don't want to have to go out multiple times and they end up with this big, tank full of combinations in order to be able to take care of the pest. And this is what's kind of exciting about Expire is oh sorry, they also wanted to have systemic activity. That's
Mm.
another key thing that makes products really useful, especially that's what gives them the lasting power in a plant, so because it can continue to move up into the plant as the plant continues to grow.
That makes sense. I've heard all of those requests coming from
Yeah.
growers. They
Yep.
all make a ton of sense. The REI, definitely losing products from the market is always a challenge. And then the amount of time that you and the companies that bring these products to market have to go jump through all those hoops to bring a product to market. It's got to be a good one. It's got to be broad spectrum. And no, that makes a ton of sense.
So with hearing all this information, we really did listen when we brought out Expire into the marketplace. And so let's go talk a little bit more about this and dig in a little bit deeper. So we have an ornamental insecticide that really does answer some of the questions or some of the statements that the growers all made. And so we have two active ingredients, two different modes of action,
Mm.
a single word caution on the label, and controls 39
Oh, wow.
insects on the label. That's fantastic, including 7 of the top 10 pests in nurseries and greenhouses. And so if you start thinking about all the pests that could possibly be, I mean, we're talking about thrips and spider mites and aphids and Lepidoptera, and the list just continues to go on. And so one of the things that I often are making recommendations about, because this is such a broad spectrum insecticide, I really don't feel like it needs a tank mixing partner.
Hmm.
Um, Now, certainly, if you need to put down fungicides or some other things like that at the same time, absolutely take advantage of the timeout spraying. But this is such a broad, application. I don't feel like you need to increase your cost to spray for on this in this case. And so we'll kind of talk through some of this in just a bit. And then minimal phytotoxic to risk. And I've got some great information to show some of the work that we've done from the plant safety side of things. And then less disruptive to beneficials. We know that beneficials are an important part of the tools that growers are starting to utilize. And so when we bring products to market, we've got the responsibility to take a look and see how safe they can be. Now, obviously, there's a lot of beneficial species out there, and are they going to be safe on all? No, but there is quite a few that they are. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
That's great. I mean, I've seen so many phyto photos in the last couple years come through with growers just wondering what the heck is wrong here. And so I know that that's definitely an issue, and that's great that that's something you guys focus on. And then the beneficials, that to me is, a lot of growers do run a hybrid approach to control of pests, and more and more companies coming with lists of what these products are safe to use with, the better off everyone's going to be. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this last point, the virtual no odor. I mean, that's a, if you think about, when I was younger in the industry, everything we sprayed really was kind of unpleasant the next day. And so being able to have products that don't have odor is really just a nice to have for sure.
We used to play a game where we'd make new employees sniff the bottles, and I remember Malthion was
Oh
the
yeah,
stinkiest one, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
we would
absolutely.
just laugh and laugh as they were just, rolling around in the ground, grossed out.
Yeah,
That is funny. That's
yeah.
cool.
All right, so we'll do a little bit of a review, and I think it's really important for us to understand a few things about the product label, and then we'll dig into some other things about Expire. But I want to talk real quickly about the IRAC mode of action group numbers on a product label. And so every product label is required to have this information. And one of the things, I think we get a lot of feedback from folks about, man, I wish the labels all look the same. And boy, do I wish they look the same too. However, this is one of those things that looks the same across all labels. And so that's the IRAC numbers. And so here you can see that we've got those two active ingredients, sulfoxaflor and spinetoram. They're a group 4C for sulfoxaflor, and spinetoram is sharing a group of a group 5. Okay. And so that information is always at the top and very beginning of a label. And so that's just something I wanted to bring up right off the bat so we can always think about, because this will be important when we talk a little bit about resistance management towards the end of our talk today. Kind of going over those two active ingredients a little bit. We've got sulfoxaflor, which is that group 4C. What's important about this is a non-neonic option. And so you're going to get a lot of the same kind of control that we would expect to get from a neonic without that neonic classification. And so that is really key. And that's kind of also where you see where this is being able to be such a broad spectrum insecticide. We see a lot of the same kind of control that we saw from neonics. So this is really a good option in this space. And then spinetoram. And spinetoram is actually very similar to spinosad in the fact that it's kind of like that next generation of spinosad that's out there. And so it does still share the group 5 as it has spinosads there. However, it is, like I said, the next generation. And kind of what it allows us to do is it really helps us with resistance management and kind of helping make it a little bit harder for it to become resistant to. Okay.
Not having and not being a neonic means that it's not going to it's not going to stop growers from shipping to retailers that do not allow neonic products in their stores.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of those things, like, and I know there's different strategies from a lot of that, but this is a one of those things is we see a lot of folks using Expire
Mhm.
kind of late because of its crop safety in the season, and so it's almost like the cleanup tool right before shipping in a lot of
Okay.
cases for folks. And so again, that's kind of goes along with that. It is a product that's allowed to be utilized in those known non-neonic locations. So the two different modes of action, really broadens that spectrum of control. You end up with both chewing and sap feeding insects. This really does help with reduce the likelihood of resistance, and really offers that option for IPM rotations, between subgroups and recommended only if no other options are available. And so what's really important, I think, to take away from here is that we've really done our due diligence in bringing a product that is just broad spectrum and will really help us on the taking care of resistance management. So I talked about broad spectrum earlier, and I said 39 insects, and here's just a few of them. Controls both the sap feeding and chewing, like I've mentioned. Thrips, aphids, whitefly, scale, mealybugs, and the list just continues to go on. Down towards the bottom, we've got some spider mite suppression. And that's an interesting label. And so, like, if you'd ever ask a grower, hey, are you interested in suppressing? No, we want to control
Right.
spider mites. And I will say, I did some work on this earlier when I was still in R&D. And one of the things that I think was important to understand is a lot of our third-party work that we do when we make label claims.
Mhm.
And so we took this out to 4 universities, and we did 4 university trials, and 3 of those showed control with spider mites, and 1 was inconclusive.
Okay.
Well, we don't get to go back and change and rerun that trial again. We just simply have to take that as inconclusive. And so, unfortunately, at that time, we were left with suppression as the answer. Now, I was curious at the time when I was in R&D and working with the plant health team. I wanted to know for myself. So I took some tropical plants out to the point of webbing, which is almost to the point of no return, in all
Mhm.
honesty, when you talk about spider mites. And what I thought I was going to get was maybe this quick knockdown that then was going to have this secondary flare up that was going to be right back as a problem. And I was really surprised. I ran the trial 2 times and saw control both times.
Oh, wow.
And that control lasted for about 21 days. And so to think that you knocked down spider mites in a situation where there was webbing. Now, did the webbing get cleaned up? No, of course not. That's not how spider mites work. However, we did stop it dead in its tracks from becoming a problem moving forward. So I do feel like that again, because this is a broad spectrum, is this the leading product in a mite rotation? No. But guess what? The chances of going out and spraying just for spider mites, probably slim to none.
Yeah.
Chances are you've got one of the above as well. And that's a great thing to have as a product. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of clarity around there. I think a lot of people see that on the label, and I think it's worth mentioning. Then you see all those Lepidoptera over there, and just tons. And we see this a lot of Expire gets used during mum season, and also kind of during like that fall cabbage and kale kind of season. Those are kind of really key crops where we see a lot of usage. All right, so we kind of covered there. We're talking about 7 of the top 10 pests. Talked through the spider mite suppression. Let's take a look at it. So here's a quick look at some beet armyworm on some aster. And this is 7 days after being untreated. We did inoculate with beet armyworm in this case. So we infested on day 1. And after 7 days, here's the control there on the right. So obviously, it's doing its job and took care of. And you'll notice that there's quite a bit of new growth
Mhm.
in this. And that foliage is also protected. And that's because of how this is moving into the plant up into the new growth. Here's that spider mite first-hand look at it. So this is after 21 days of untreated. You notice that the plants there really do show some spider mite damage. And again, 21 days after 2 treatments with Expire, really looking really, really clean. I also wanted to talk through the phytotoxicity side of this. And so we tested this on over 300 crops. That's a lot for an insecticide. You'll see us do that a lot when we talk about herbicides, because there is a lot of danger and risk when you talk about herbicides, especially when you're talking about over the top. But we were still really adamant that growers, even in the greenhouse sector, are concerned about this. And so we wanted to give them assurance that we did our due diligence and really tried to screen this across a wide variety of plants. So we saw no visible residue on leaves or flowers. That really makes it an important tool. If it was in the fall, we'd be talking about poinsettias and its safety on open, or colored bracts. But whether it be poinsettias in color and or annuals in the springtime, again, no residue on leaves or flowers.
which is great because so many greenhouses in North America have small blocks of a ton of different, varieties,
Yep.
and nobody really wants to, change what they're spraying from, bench to bench. So
Yeah,
I
no,
think
not at all.
300's a lot.
It is.
That covers just about everything, I would
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna be hard pressed to find something that we've not done some trial work on. And we continue to do some things. We saw a big trend a couple of years ago um, in succulents,
Hmm.
and especially like with scale and things like that.
Yeah,
And so we decided to go ahead and, although we're not going to necessarily go after label changes, but we still wanted to do some work for the industry. And so we ran it across a wide variety of succulents to again to show the crop safety.
that's cool.
Yeah. So, a lot of people will read a label and it talks a little bit about, if your crop is not on the label, and it doesn't necessarily restrict you from using a product. However, you are kind of taking some of that risk on your own. And it always talks about, be sure to run a trial on a small block of plants beside that. And so I wanted to kind of share with you guys a little bit today about what we do when we contract this out with our university folks to do these applications. And so our university trials are using up to 4 times the highest labeled rate when we make these applications. And this isn't to saying that you should go out and apply 4 times the labeled rate. This is simply showing you that the safety.
Right.
And it's those, phone call rings at 4 o'clock on a Friday and someone's panic stricken because somebody mixed something wrong, and what do we do to fix this? And when we have that conversation, we can feel pretty confident, and even at 4 times the labeled rate, we're able to be, still be considered safe. And something else that we did that was a little bit excessive, we made 2 applications 7 days apart, and so that's really tight. That's above what is normally on the label, because
Mhm.
normally it's 14 days between applications. And so again, we've really, 4 times the amount was applied in a really shorter amount of time. And so really, we should get a really good look at when if there's any issues from a phytotoxicity point of view. Less disruptive to beneficials. So no significant impact on certain parasitic insects and some of the arthropods that are out there. And so we do recommend to certainly do your due diligence, utilize the biologicals companies that you work with, utilize their toxicology information, because you should be able to type in expire into there and them to give you a list of things that it's safe and things that it's not safe, and also maybe even some timing recommendations. Sometimes it's not a fact that you can't use it, but maybe you shouldn't use it for, X number of days
Mhm.
after a release. And so we want to be able to have growers to be able to have as many tools in the tool belt as possible. And so by being a little bit safer on beneficials, it allows that grower that opportunity to utilize biologicals when it makes sense. All right, bee sustainability. This is kind of a hot topic across the industry. And so no concerns on native bees and pollinators for greenhouse applications. We know that those are in closed environments and not as much foraging takes place there. But from the nursery application side of things, the risk of pollinators is greatly reduced after 3 hours of dry time. And in fact, I don't even think it would take 3 hours. But I think when we did this, we wanted to be sure we covered our good friends down in Florida, or those really hot, humid areas where it does take a little longer to get products to dry. So really, that safety becomes as soon as the plant is dry. That's where the safety around pollinators really becomes. All right, and then risk to manage bees and native pollinators from contact with the pesticide or residues can be minimalized when applications are made 2 hours prior to sunset, and or when temperatures are below 50. And this is all information that's on the back of the label.
Okay.
From like a bee safety side of things, this does not have that restriction around bees. It's giving you some guidelines. However, it does allow you to continue to use the product.
I think safety with pollinators and I guess the ability to use alongside some biocontrol agents is such a big deal, and I think it's really cool that the team at Corteva does those trials and understands that. And like you said, if you have questions, reach out to your
Yeah.
biocontrol supplier, and
Yep.
they're gonna know they should know what the actives in expire and what that
Yep.
toxicology looks like. Not
Yep. And most of them have really good sections where you can just go in on their
yeah,
website and type and get that information. So
for
super
sure.
helpful. Let's talk a little bit about some of the restrictions when it talks about the greenhouse side of things. And so and there is a little bit difference here between the greenhouse and the nursery. So I think it's worth talking about. So greenhouse really is that structure space that's enclosed. So whether that be polytunnels, glass, you name it, kind of just that enclosed structure. And so we do have that minimum treatment interval of 14 days. So there's no reason to come back in with expire again until you've reached that 14 days. The maximum number of applications in a greenhouse is 6.
Hmm.
Okay. And so we really want to be sure we're understanding what that means. And so, we got a lot of these big open ranges nowadays that kind of like, oh, well, if you sprayed Expire on the pansy crop over here, and that range is wide open,
Mhm.
you essentially have applied Expire to that entire population.
Gotcha.
Okay. People need to really understand that because, and that's why does that matter? It matters because of the resistance management.
Right.
That's because, I swear, bugs and thrips especially, I think they can see Tyvek coming. I think they see it and they go running. And so what happens is we'll drive those populations into other parts of the greenhouse. And there's where we could become with some issues if we're not careful. Maximum consecutive applications is 2. I've got a bunch of growers who really, some folks rotate right after one another, and other people like to do the back-to-back.
Mhm.
I don't really see much difference, to be perfectly honest. I think it's what works for your application. Maximum yearly application rate is at 21.25 ounces per acre across the year. Now, this is one thing that I think in the future when we bring products to market, we've got to take into account. It talks about do not apply to stages of edible crops.
Mhm.
We know that there's a lot of small growers out there that have greenhouses that would love to have hanging baskets
Yeah.
in the air and vegetables down below.
Yeah.
That's the reality of things. And so we do need to think about when we bring new products to market about can we find ways to work around that space. And currently with Expire, there is no ability to spray on edible crops. It's interesting because both of those active ingredients are available in ag and
Hmm.
specialty crops. So it's not that they're unsafe. It's just that it's just a interesting use site that we've, not been able to negotiate.
So follow labels always,
Yeah.
and
Yes, yes, yes.
don't apply expire to edible crops.
Yeah, you got it.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then there is no restrictions on applications during bloom, which is good. Now let's move it over to the nursery side of things. So we'll see again that minimal treatment interval is 14 days, maximum number of applications. We did bring it down a little bit.
Hmm.
So now we're at 4. Maximum consecutive applications is also 2. The maximum yearly application per acre is still the same, that 21.25. But do not make more than 1 application during bloom. The single application during bloom must not exceed that 5.5 ounces per acre mark. And so again, that has a lot to do with resistance management.
Okay.
That's why those things get put into place. And sometimes, I mean, you've been down to Florida, I'm sure, Bill, and
Hmm.
notice how close a lot of those nurseries and
Yeah,
folks are right next to food production. And
exactly.
so this is why um, things like that kind of have to get put in place because we need to be able to keep those active ingredients working in both sectors.
No, that makes sense. I was kind of wondering, but that makes a lot of sense for sure.
All right, so the fast acting. Within 9 hours, most insects are controlled or stop feeding. We've got some awesome videos. We had it at Cultivate a couple years ago showing just how fast the aphids started to die. And this is actually within minutes
Wow.
that it starts to, and like the aphids literally almost look like they've been out on a night on the town and then start to fall off the plant. So really quick, fast acting. That also works for a lot of the Lepidopteras. Talks a little bit about the once expires dry. Again, that risk to beneficials is greatly reduced. And then whitefly and other sap feeding insects really start to become controlled about that 6 hour mark. All insects have stopped feeding or are controlled at that 9 hours. So awesome, awesome to see how fast that product really is working. 12-hour REI. I'd love to see something a little shorter, but 12 hours from a lot of growers, that's something that they can work with. A lot of times you can make those applications late in the day and get back into your facilities in the morning. So let's talk a little bit about how this long lasting works. So we get this translaminar activity. So this moves from the surface of the leaf to inside the leaf. And then because it's xylem mobile, this will move up into the plant and into that new growth. And that's really what gives you this long lasting control. Kind of like when we saw the aster back before, it really showed that new growth.
Yeah.
It was all nice and clean. So why is this important? Well, it controls insects that are out of the direct line of spray. Spraying, I think, is an art, to be honest. And I've seen some really great applicators, and I've seen some challenging ones that could probably use a little more work. But what we can do through a formulation perspective is we can help formulate products to make them move in and around the plant easier to make everybody on the same level playing field as an applicator. So that's one of the things that we get to do. Again, this gives you just really excellent residual activity after that initial application is made because it's continuing to move up into the plant. Talk a little bit more about long lasting. Certain pests are all over the board, kind of. So obviously it is kind of dependent on each pest, but green peach aphids about 4 weeks, cherry thrips 2 weeks, silver leaf whitefly 2 weeks, and then a lot of lepidopters about 2 weeks. And so that's definitely in the realm of control for many pests that are out there. So Expire is easy to use. Comes in a water dispersible granule. If you've never tried one of these before or seen how this is packaged, I got a little bit of a demonstration here in just a second. It comes in a 16-ounce package, makes up to 800 gallons of spray solution. It has a easy measuring device that's attached to the bottle on top. And really this helps out from a storage perspective. And here's a good little video of just how quickly that disperses. So you drop that in there and all of a sudden you've got really good solution. Because it has this consistent particle size, has low dust, it's easy to pour and measure, really does disperse into water really easily.
That's really cool. I've never,
Yeah.
I was thinking in my head, how does a granule, how quickly is it gonna disperse through a liquid? But
Yeah,
that's impressive.
almost instantaneously.
Well,
So
you guys are pros at that kind of thing.
it's an important component for sure. You can use this alone or in a tank mix. And kind of like I mentioned before, I really think when we're talking tank mixes, I really do think the tank mix should be fungicides. I find it hard pressed that you would need another insecticide in there. If you were to say, hey, I'm gonna put something in the tank, what's it gonna be? Maybe insect growth regulator.
Okay.
That'd be a possibility, but again, I still think it's really strong as a standalone. Apply as a foliar spray just to the point of runoff, and you've got a pretty wide range. You've got all the way up to 200 gallons per acre when we talk about that, and so that's a wide range of sprays because we know a lot of guys who can be down in the 100-gallon range with no problem. But it does allow those guys who are, especially in the nursery setting, with tank sprayers and stuff like that, that ability to use the product properly. Can be used with air blast. I didn't include this. However, we are starting to see an awful lot of drone applications, and frankly, the phone has rung off the hook since the start of the year from growers across the U.S. wanting to talk about drones and things like that. And so Expire does have an aerial application, so it automatically rolls into the being approved for drone application.
We're going to hear more about that coming soon in the future, I think. I mean,
I can
you're
believe
right.
that.
It's a topic at every conference. There tend to be exhibitors now with that kind of technology. It's coming for sure.
Yeah,
And it sounds like
absolutely.
it's already here in a lot of cases.
Yeah, definitely for sure. The nursery side of the business is really booming with it. But I can totally see where this fits outdoor,
Yeah.
color growers without a problem too.
Yeah.
Uniformity, cover upper and lower leaf for that optimum control. I think that just goes without saying. Um, so if you were to say, hey, what's an adjuvant? Do we need to utilize that and will that help? So on the label, you will see that adjuvants can optimize control on most insects. Although there is internally already some adjuvants built into the formulation.
Hmm.
So whether you do need one, that's really a grower choice. I don't feel like you really need one because there is some already built into the product. However, if you're a grower who uses them all the time, they've been tested across many different of the products that are out there on the market and have no issues there. Quickly go over some rates. You will find that you will have different rates associated to the different pests. That's not something new. That's pretty normal when we talk about insecticides. So if there is reasons why you don't have particular pests that you need to deal with, there is options for you to use less of the product. One of those things, though, that I will want to point out to you, I think about the spider mite and the scale especially. We see a lot of southern growers dealing with scale,
Mhm.
and that is one of the things that does require that higher rate in order to control. So you will need that 3.5 ounces per 100 gallons. Build that all the way out. When to use? Apply when pests appear. That's a kind of a common one. Want to be able to follow insecticide resistance management. We do not want to make more than the 2 consecutive applications like we've talked about before. And then before we start to rotate to a new class of chemistry outside of that group 4 and 5. And then, of course, we will talk about it again. Follow the label directions. Here's some more specifics around when to use. And so there's a few different things for associated to beetles, bagworms, lace bugs, lepidopters, scale, spider mites, and whitefly. All they're kind of, most of them are that when you first see them, but there is a few things that talk a little bit about maybe like on bagworms when they're at the larva stage and feeding's better, scale, better time to do it when it's crawler stage. So there is some specifics there. And I think that'll help growers really target, is Expire the product right now that will solve my problem? So this is some really good information to take a look at. All right, so we're gonna make a summary about Expire. We got the 2 active ingredients, sulfoxaflor and spinetoram, 2 different modes of actions. This will really reduce the resistance, controls more than 39 insects, 7 of the top 10 nursery and greenhouse pests, minimal phytotoxic risk to plants. We've tested over 300 crops and ornamental plants, less disruptive to beneficials, fast acting with a 12-hour REI, long lasting residual up to 4 weeks with certain pests. And so I think this is a really almost a no-brainer for growers looking for a solution this spring.
It's almost the whole toolbox in a bottle.
It kind of is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we wrap up today, I thought it'd be good for us to do a little bit of a refresher on integrated pest management a little bit and insect resistance. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through these slides, but I thought it would be good for us to have a little, as we're all kind of entering that time of year where insects are going to become a challenge. So, what is integrated pest management? Well, it's really that sustainable approach to managing pests by combining both biological, physical, and chemical tools in a way that minimizes economic, health, and environmental risk. When you're thinking about utilizing integrated pest management, you got to do several things. You got to identify the pests. You got to monitor the pest populations. You got to do some things with prevention. You got to look at control. Well, and we'll talk a little bit about action thresholds, but I'm a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of just going out and spraying because it's Tuesday. I want to set some thresholds out there that when the pest reaches a certain number, we're going to do something. In some cases, it's going to be spray. Sometimes it might be release beneficials. And in some cases, we may have to remove the product altogether. And so I think, again, having good action thresholds are key. Using label recommended doses. It is absolutely imperative that we utilize the right amounts that are out there. If it says it needs to be a certain ounce per 100 gallons, it needs to be that, because if you would give a sub-lethal dose, all you're going to do is open the door for resistance.
Mhm.
And so it's really important to follow those label. And then more is not always better. And so you don't want to get to that case either. So again, those labels are there for a reason, and those recommendations are really important to follow.
Well, and companies like Corteva are doing the research to establish those recommended
Yep.
doses
Yep.
over years. I mean, that's part of the
Yep.
reason it takes 10 plus years to bring a product
Yep.
to market. So,
Yep.
I mean, people shouldn't just, make their own guesses
Yeah.
when the experts have done the work.
Yep. Absolutely. And so I always say people should talk out to their university extension folks as well. Yeah, it's super key to know who those folks are in your area, because those can be your first line of defense in many cases to helping understand some things. Scouting. There's a lot of words on here. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but having a scouting program and having a dedicated person is really key. The other side of this is the record keeping side of things. It is not okay just to go out and do scouting and then never to do anything with that record keeping.
Hmm.
That record keeping allows you to review your year and go back and make tweaks to the process that you just ran in the year before. And so by having a robust record keeping process is really key. So like if you recognize that you had an aphid or a thrips flare up, understanding when that was can get you ahead of that next year. Because guess what? We're not going to not have those pests. It's just a matter of when and how much, And so by utilizing those records are really key.
And
Then,
everybody is walking through the greenhouse with a phone in their pocket. And you can
yeah,
take those notes, you can take a picture of the sticky cards. I mean, it's not hard these days to keep a record. So I think that that's really good advice and
yeah,
something that should be in every sort of set of protocols.
yeah, absolutely. And then train other employees to identify pests. You don't have to be on the IPM team or plant health team to understand what the challenges are. And so I encourage every grower to identify the two or three things that keep them up at night and to be sure they share with every member of their team. And that's really important. Now, the next one is that develop that communication plan. And so if you're going to enable all of these people to look and be scouts for you, it's important to have a good communication plan and what you're actually supposed to communicate and what information is important, because guess what, a picture that says I found some thrips doesn't really help me too much.
Yeah.
It's about I found thrips in block so and so on this particular crop, 3/4 of the way down.
Right.
That's the kind of level of kind of information that you're going to need to have a communication plan for. But again, I challenge you, everybody in your operation should be part of scouting. Biological control, I'm not going to go into too much of this, but I did want to simply talk about the fact that there are quite a few growers who are taking advantage of biological controls in their operations. We want to be sure that we're using pesticides that don't disrupt these guys and let them be able to do their work. And sometimes it's a certain period of production. I got a lot of growers who say I'm biological control until week number such and such,
Mhm.
and then because we're getting so much closer to shipping and the tolerance for pest is zero, that they kind of switch gears a little bit. And so understand some of the things that you can utilize biological control for.
Well, it really is a hybrid approach, I think, is the more growers I talk to, the more companies that are traditional chemical and the companies that are, 100% bio-based, they understand that
Yep.
it is a hybrid approach. It's a comprehensive strategy. It's true IPM.
The mechanical and physical controls. So we think about those things kind of like It could be potentially the traps when we're talking about rodents for mechanical control. And then physical controls would be like some of the mulches or weed fabrics or steam sterilization, or in some cases, like thrip screens on the ends of greenhouses. So those could be kind of be considered the mechanical side of things. And then, of course, the chemical control, the use of pesticides. Pesticides should only be used when needed and in combination with other approaches that we've already kind of talked about for that long-term control. And by doing so, you're going to lengthen the amount of time that these pesticides will be tools for you.
Well, and
Pesticides.
I've heard folks say from chemical companies that, the best way to control a lot of these pests and diseases is by following your good growing methods. Like if you are growing that crop healthy, I mean, sure, you can't avoid pests dropping in or pests coming in on inputs, but if you're following very strong growing habits, your risk goes down.
Yep.
And then hopefully you might just need to come in once or twice, knock down a pest population, and then get back to business.
Yeah. I mean, I think even I used this example before, but had a grower that really had problem with a lot of propagation material in his facility, kind of constantly being challenged with pest.
Hmm.
But this was also where all of the new material arrived, and it's where everybody in the facility passed through to go to the growing range.
Yeah.
Well, you're putting this material that's your most important product right now
Hmm.
at risk
Right.
because every person in your facility passes through here. Is there a better place on the facility to relocate this part of the plants? And they made that change and made a massive difference in pest management for them on all of their young liners. So do be creative and be thinking about the flow of traffic within your facility because that can make a difference too.
Well, they always say the managers are the ones who move the pest diseases around because they're walking from greenhouse to greenhouse more than anybody else. I
Yeah.
always find that funny. Like,
Yeah.
who's really to blame here?
I know, right? Well, it's like even at Corteva and some of our research greenhouses, there's an order of,
Mm,
because obviously if we're researching problems, so
yeah,
we've got to be able to make sure that we don't take problems elsewhere in the
for
facility.
sure.
So there's an order of operation there. All right. So we've talked a little bit about IPM in general. And so now we're going to shift gears and finish up the day with insecticide resistance. And so this is really the sensitivity that a pest population can be really reflected and repeated of this product to achieve the expected level of control. And so really what is this? It's just basically when a product is overused, it obviously just becomes less effective. The insects simply build up a tolerance to this. And we're going to walk through these different mechanisms that are out there. And so there is target site resistance. And so the target site resistance is where where it acts within the insect itself. This may be genetically modified to prevent the insecticide from binding or interacting with the site action. And this kind of reduces the effect of the insecticide. That metabolic resistance is really the most common mechanism. And this is really the side of things where that insect can detoxify or destroy the toxins faster than it can affect the insect. And so this is kind of like just the overall tolerance to those insecticides. And that's what happens when you have such repeated use of the same product over and over again. Certain pests really do that. And so this would be exactly where we see when we talk about thrips resistance, this is exactly where we get that from. Yeah. Insecticides use their internal enzyme systems to break down insecticides. And so again, this is really how this all happens. And this is just, it truly has this enzyme that really can then just take care of and detox that insecticide from being a factor. Penetration resistance is really that outer cuticle of an insect that slows the absorption of a broad range of chemicals. And so this is kind of an interesting one. We actually see penetration resistance in the greenhouse a little bit because sometimes even the way the plants grow in a greenhouse, they're kind of in the perfect environment. And so they may not have as thick of leaf or as, kind of tough of a plant as a plant that's being grown outdoors. And so we will see some penetration resistance from the greenhouse side of things. And then the behavioral is kind of like my favorite because it's kind of like that whole concept of like they see us coming. They sense something's going on, or like in the case of like growers down in Florida, the harvesting in one field of vegetables and all of a sudden, hey, our food's disappearing. Let's go find some, yeah, let's go to the next door neighbor so that's growing ornamentals. We've all heard of IRAC, and so like, what in the world is this? And so IRAC really is the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee. So it's this whole team, and so it's not just Corteva; it's all of the big players that are out there in the in the chemical world trying to come up with these products to bring. And so we work together on being able to be sure that our products are helping fight this resistance issues.
It's great. And I see representatives from all those companies at conferences on the same panel having
Yep.
these discussions. I think yeah, I think that's really powerful for our industry to have a committee like that that's looking at the different active ingredients and modes of action and coming up with the recommendations.
Yep.
So it's because everybody wants to avoid resistance.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of those posters that you can get from folks out there in the industry. If you don't have a copy of this, you definitely should get one for your office. I think it's a really key to have a quick visual because it does list all the products that are out there with the active ingredients. And so you can better understand. And for me, I'm a very visual person, so I can look down a list and in an Excel
Mhm.
and get kind of bored, where this is a little bit more appealing for me to digest it. It really helps drive home that messaging about, oh, that is in the same chemical class. And so I do like to use the poster as a source of information for me. All right, so those key components as we kind of wrap up here. So scouting and pest identification is absolutely key. There's no point if you can't identify the pest. There should be no point of out there just making a spray just because. You want to be able to integrate your local IPM practices whenever possible. To be honest, well, we're very lucky in the fact that, especially greenhouses, we don't have a lot of localized stuff as much as they do on the ag side of the industry. However, there are cases, especially like Florida would be a great example, where there are some things. Think about the Big Thrips Challenge right now down in
Yep.
South Florida, and so that's a great example about where there's some key things about what products you're going to use and what order you should be spraying that the local authorities are putting out there for those growers. You want to be able to avoid those repeated sequential use of insecticides with that single mode of action. And for that season-long control, really insects really just need to think about it as one generation per crop per season. And the key, rotate.
Yep.
For insects with multiple or overlapping generations, use that treatment window approach. Applications should be targeted early or at the most susceptible insect stage. That's a key thing to think about. And then insecticide mixtures like Expire may offer IRM benefits when appropriately used in a rotation strategy. And then if the field failures actually do happen, resistance could be the cause. And so it really should be, it's important for you to reach out to your local company representative or ag advisor and help walk through the strategies to that. I'll use another product of Corteva's that we heard a lot about. That was Conserve.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back, 15, 20 years ago, when Conserve was out there, we knew that people were using Conserve all the time, and there was quite a bit of resistance in different parts of the country. And we had to make some recommendations to growers about how long they should stop using a product for before that product can be used again. And Conserve still used in the market today,
Yep.
and growers are still happy to see that it works, but it's only because we're utilizing the product the way the label says. So,
Well, and that communication is key. I mean, if
yep,
you're seeing issues,
yep,
report that back. And
yep,
that's really, I mean, we all got to work together here to
yep.
some extent.
Yeah, and so we're always happy to help. And we've had this at local levels before,
Mhm.
at really small, like even single site locations where we've had to work with folks to help them through some things. We've identified something that they were doing. Great example being that big wide open range where they were spraying small populations of the house, and the pests were simply moving around within the house, and so those were building up some resistance. All right, key out of all that stuff, rotate, rotate, and rotate.
Yep.
Finish up with mixture considerations. Understand the active ingredients and the patterns for the targeted pest. Mixtures should really provide technical advantages for controlling the pest, increase the level of the target pest control, and also this helps increase the spectrum. So similar to the concept that we had with Expire, by having those two actives, we really broadens the number of pests that we're able to control at one time. And then all of the following should be considered when using mixtures. Individual insecticides should be highly effective against um, what they're being applied to and at the effective rates. Mixture components with the same IRAC mode of action classifications are not recommended for IRM. Okay, so you wouldn't want to have, for instance, you wouldn't want to put Expire and Conserve in the tank together.
Right.
Consider cross-resistance issues between individual components for the targeted pest. And then IRM benefits are greatest if the components have similar residual activity. So you wouldn't want to have a product that had 7 days of control matched up with something that had 4 weeks of control. That simply wouldn't be a good combination in the tank. And so, does this really mean the resistance is the total loss of an insecticide? Not at all. With current agricultural practices, development of insecticide resistance is definitely inevitable. However, even when resistance is present, crop protection insecticides can remain useful part of IPM tool for insect control. And insecticide resistance management programs can help you really preserve the insecticide susceptibility.
Well, in following IRM protocols and having those in place in your business guarantees that you're still, well, almost guarantees that you're still going to have, great controls available and that you're
Yep.
going to be able to take care of the problem. I think that when growers build protocols and strategies into their plan, IRM has to be part of that.
And I use the example here with Expire. Again, this is just helping you identify how those products and what you should be doing to check into those. And so here, this is looking at those two actives again, and it's showing you where they're at on there. And so if you were to go into making tank mixes with something else in there, you'd want to be finding something outside of those two different group numbers. The industry is definitely motivated to help folks with insect resistance management. It's really going to help protect the life of the products that are out there. You must absolutely read the label. It's really helpful information on there. And in some cases, there is some resistance management strategies in place on labels nowadays. Here's some great resources. So the IRAC online option here, so you can find a ton of resources associated to managing insecticide resistance. And that same thing also works as well from the herbicide resistance. So you have HRAC and then the FRAC as well from the fungicide side of things. And so being able to take a look at those organizations, seeing the information they have available will help you make those better decisions moving forward. So in order for insecticide resistance management to be successful, we really need cooperation from all the stakeholders. So hopefully today you guys learned quite a bit of information about Expire and controlling pests this spring season. But if you wanted to learn more information about up-to-date information about Corteva and some of the other products and updates, here's a QR code that you can scan to get any information from Corteva.
Excellent, excellent. And I will scan the QR code and make sure to put all those resources in the show notes as well so that they're all just one click away. In addition to the IRAC chart, I'll link to that and also IRAC online, those resources. I think that those are good links to have bookmarked and close to hand.
Absolutely. And if anybody's got questions, I'm just a phone call or an email away. I get calls and emails all the time from growers, whether it's a question about IPM or it's a questions about other stuff going on in the industry. I'm happy to talk. I'm definitely, like I've been in the business for a long time, and I'm always willing to share. I did want to point out, we do have a pretty robust team across the U.S. And so if you're not familiar with who your Corteva rep is, you're certainly welcome to reach out to me directly. But there's also people that are in your area that can also be contacted. And the best way to reach out to those folks, you can either reach out to me to get contact information, or your distributor rep that you work with on a regular basis and say, hey, I'd love to have the Corteva rep come out and talk to us. We'd be happy to do so. And so we do that all the time. Feel free to reach out to the team, and we'd be happy to come out for a visit. I want to thank you guys for your time today. Again, there's contact information if you have any questions, and feel free to follow up. And Bill, hopefully this met your objectives, but I think we got some things covered today.
That's quite a team too. That's
Yeah.
impressive. It looks like an NFL coaching roster. No, I really appreciate your time. We covered a lot. Glad that you talked a lot about Expire, two actives, broad spectrum, 39 plus pest controlled is super impressive, and then the long lasting, low phyto, all of that I think wraps up into an excellent product for every grower's toolbox. And then talking about an overview of IPM best practices, I think everybody needs to hear that. I love that information. I've seen you talk about that in the past, and the way that you break it down is so helpful. And then jumping right into IRM and the importance of a plan along those lines. You gave me way more than I expected, and I know that I appreciate it, and the viewers and listeners sure do as well. And all those resources, like I said, I will do my best to drop those into the show notes. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon, right? We got more
Yeah,
stuff
absolutely.
about.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Brock. And I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand. And on behalf of our entire team at Ball Publishing, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care out there. Have a great spring.